In the next few chapters, we'll go into detail about exactly how mats are pulled. But even though it's simple, too many people forget all about matting as soon as they're on the set. So the point of these chapters is to hammer in the question, where's the mat going to come from? If you can't answer that question on the set, you could be in for it in post. Because what's important to understand is that if you can't pull a mat using one of the techniques we're covering, you probably can't pull a mat at all. And that would be bad. So let's go over one more time why you need a mat. You first of all need a mat to extract anything. You also need a mat if you want to process anything, like color correct it. And you need a mat if you want to put anything behind anything. But first, some good news, which is that 3D always comes with a built-in mat. So you never need to worry about mats for 3D. We're only talking about pulling mats from live action. And we can either do that automatically using a keyer, or manually by painting it by hand. Starting with keyers, you simply put an actor in front of a green screen. Tell the keyer that we're using the color green as a key. And then we can lift the character out and put her into something else. This is called color keying or chroma keying, which mean the same thing to key based on a color. In an ideal world, that's all there is to it. But there's a vast difference between a good key and a bad key. And we'll talk a lot about this on Volume 5 and 6, but let's cover a few basics now. Color keyers work by isolating a color range, and the smaller the range, the better. In this shot, there's actually a difference of many exposure stops between left and right. What that does to your key is that it ruins your edges. And to explain that, let's look at the doll's hair. We know that the green screen is green out here, and that the hair is white or light brown. But if you look at the fine hair here, it's actually too thin to fill out a pixel all the way. Instead, the pixels are half brown and half green, which is called a subpixel. The problem is that when the background color is not even, we have to start defining a bigger and bigger color range as green, which causes us to eat more and more into the subpixels. That's very bad because we end up shaving off all the fine detail, giving everybody a haircut. This overcutting of the edges is the hallmark of bad green screen. And by the same token, good edges and fine detail is the hallmark of green screen done right. So for color keying, the number one goal is as clear and distinct a color as possible. Now what's really interesting is that you can actually use any color you want. It doesn't have to be green. So if we want to color correct this person's clothes, all we have to do is key it. Again, we highlight everything that has the color we want, which defines the color range. And then the software cuts a mat for us. This is what we mean with automatic matting, because the mat perfectly fits her contour and animates automatically. And we didn't have to do anything but set up the keyer. Of course, it also selects the house in the background, but we could exclude that with a manual mat. To do the color correction, we then simply use the keyer to drive a color corrector. Then we tint towards blue, or whatever else. And all this is isolated to a few specific areas. Let's do another keyer to pick up the pink areas, and let's make them more orange just to do something. And actually, let's grab all the greenery in the background. Make a mat. drive a color corrector with it, tweak some colors, and here's our shot, which is very different from before. And just to remember, here's the before shot. And after again. This is a terrific way to do color correction, and it's especially powerful for commercials because you get very specific control. But the main point is that we can use a color keyer to pull a matte from anything that has a clear color. However, sometimes color is not what defines the area we want to work on, and that brings us to the luminance keyer, which keys on a brightness range. In this shot, the sky is completely burned out, and there are obviously no colors to grab because it's all white. But this time we select the range of brightness we want, which produces a matte we can use to replace the sky. Of course, we're selecting a lot of other areas that have the same brightness, meaning that we'll have sky showing in the bottom of the shot too, so the matte still needs some paintwork. But this basically gets the job done. This is actually a solution to a shooting problem you have every day, because now you know that it's relatively doable to fix an overcast or burned out sky. The thing to look out for is that the rest of the scene is lit in a way that's consistent with the new sky, or it might not make sense lighting-wise. It doesn't make sense with a hazy, retreating foreground, and then suddenly a clear blue sky behind it. Obviously, the sky needs to be made to look like it's behind the haze too. But it still looks a lot better. Also, some things make it harder to grab a key, for example, a visible cloud cover. Because there are so many shades in the sky that we can't grab it without also grabbing everything else. No keyer would fix this, we'd have to paint a matte. An out-of-focus background also makes it hard to get hold of the edges. Instead, you tend to get these halo edges when the keyer stops keying halfway through the grade between light and dark. Another kind of keyer is called a difference keyer, which can supposedly generate a key from the difference between two shots. So that if you have a shot with a person, and the same shot without the person, it should make a key from that. But in reality, it simply gives you the pixel value difference between two shots. And if both the foreground and the background are bright, there's no difference. And the key is instead full of holes and not useful without hardcore tweaking, which ruins it at the same time. So you should never count on being able to difference key because it almost never works. Finally, it's possible to shoot a silhouette pass and use it as a matte. You can only do this on static objects shot with locked cameras or motion control. Then you first shoot a beauty pass, which can be on any background. And then you backlight it and shoot it again. This pass can be converted into a matte. And then we can cut out the figure very effectively. This is used a lot on car commercials, but it only works in a very controlled environment. Now, believe it or not, as far as automatic matting goes, these are the only tools the compositor has. If you can't pull a matte using either color, brightness, difference, or silhouette, you basically can't pull a matte at all. This often comes as a surprise to directors and DPs, but there are no magic buttons. If, for example, we had the idea that this pine tree should glow pink, there's absolutely nothing that distinguishes that tree from the others and nothing for a keyer to grab. Painting a matte would be a monumental task. And if the camera were also moving, it would probably be impossible. So it's really that important to think about where the matte is going to come from.